everybody. I am here joined with my friend from school. His name is Aaron. Aaron, introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Aaron.
That is the sexy voice you're going to be hearing with me alongside my other friend, Jake. Jake, go ahead and introduce your sexy voice.
Hi, hello, I'm Jake.
I love it. Well, we are gathered here today to talk about Game of Thrones. And more specifically, we are going to be going through the episodes as they're airing, as they're progressing for this final eighth season. I almost said seventh season for some reason. And we're just going to do a little bit of a discussion on it, kind of walk through the details and what we liked and what we didn't like, which, based on our opinions, may be a lot of dislike. But we will see. I don't know how you guys felt about the episode, but I guess we could just kind of talk about initial thoughts.
I'll start off with mine. My initial thought, where the hell is Ghost? And the episode was okay.
Yeah.
It was about what I expected. I'm a little worried that it's the first episode of 6, and not a lot got done.
Yeah, really not anything got progressed in the story. All we really got was a bunch of reunions. We got... I was actually talking with Aaron before we started the podcast, and what I was most worried about going into this season was 3 things, because they started doing this more in seasons 5, 6, and 7, and those were dick jokes, poop jokes, and just showing random dicks for no reason, just to be like shocking. And because they did that in season 6, where it's just like a close-up on someone's dick, there was a bunch of poop jokes and whatnot. I was like, this is the type of writing that we've kind of led to in this series, and I just hope it doesn't progress. The very first line of this episode is a dick joke, and that really made me sad.
Kind of just an immediate letdown.
Yeah, I was like waiting 2 years, like, oh, I just hope they don't have more dick jokes and more poop jokes, because it's lazy writing, and it's just bad dialogue, and it's the first thing that starts off the episode.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't want to jump too far ahead already, but did anyone else catch that really awful burp sound effect from the dragon before they rode them and flew off?
No, I didn't.
You know what? Yeah, I think so. I assumed I heard it wrong because it was like that, I don't know, sound library sound effect.
It is like the burp sound effect that you would find in an N64 game like Banjo-Kazooie. It is literally ripped, and one of the dragon's burps, even though they just had a discussion that the dragons were starving and not really eating, and then they just hard cut to a dragon burping with the worst stock sound effect.
And to go off of that, after that, Daenerys is all like, "Oh no, my dragons aren't eating. I'm worried about them. Let's go for a scenic, ride with them." And like her facial expressions don't show like anything. Like I don't really know what to think. I think it was just kind of they wanted to show off John on the dragons, but why use the dragons being in danger to lead up to that?
Yeah, that was kind of strange, because there's also, I mean, this is completely off the lore of the show, but I'm in the middle of reading that Fire and Blood Targaryen history book, and they talk about like how if the dragons are hungry and like starved and whatnot, they're not focused on letting you ride them more so than they are just like, hey, I'm gonna go search for food, fuck y'all. Like, they're not pets, they're not just there for your entertainment type of thing. But
right.
that whole scene with John riding the dragons, I understand what they're kind of trying to do. I think they're doing 2 things, and that's kind of introducing him to the dragons, so for his character to be able to process the fact that he's a Targaryen, and so he can ride it into battle and not just like jump on it and become an instant badass. But I did think that scene was probably, because of the episode, my thoughts, I thought the episode wasn't bad. I liked a lot of what they did, even though nothing really happened, and that was kind of disappointing. But I hated that fucking dragon riding scene because it was just so stupid.
It was just so stressful, like knowing that he should be falling off. Like as every viewer has an understanding of physics to some extent that he should be falling off, worrying about when he's gonna fall off, and then it never happens, and you just kind of watch like, oh.
Well, he'd also just like die instantly if he did fall off. I'm fine with him staying on and all that. It was just so cheesy and unnecessary. But I get what they're trying to set up.
That reminds me of something that's been bothering me the whole time about the writing in this show as of once they surpass the books. The fact that, like, you just mentioned, like, kind of ludicrous, them riding a dragon without any harnesses and whatnot. Not to mention the speed they're going in winter, they should be freezing. I feel like they dropped the emphasis on winter, and it's just like, oh, winter's here, but it's really not that bad, you know? We could just have the Unsullied and Dothraki armies march up here, no problem. It's not like Stannis sacrificed his daughter to, make winter bearable for his troops. All of a sudden, winter's just like mildly.
It's a little mild.
Yeah, it just completely throws away the idea or the being a northerner that you're resilient to the cold and only they can really handle it. It just throws all that lore out the window, and it's like, these Unsullied who lived in the desert have zero problem marching up in the dead of winter to the coldest place wearing just a little bit of leather. They're perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have nipples, so they can't get cold. So
That is true. Or false.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we have to expect going forward, is especially with the time frame that they've given themselves, where like the show is going to end in the span of, like, at the time it was like 13 episodes, so now they have to cram everything in, and like things like that we kind of have to start just overlooking, because you can nitpick it forever about things that don't make sense. Like, why didn't her name's Lyanna Mormont, right? The little girl, the sassy one.
I believe so.
Whichever I'm just gonna call her Little Girl Mormont since I don't have her name, but I'm pretty sure it's Lyanna Mormont. She hasn't addressed Jorah Mormont, even though he was pardoned for it, but he was exiled from his family, and he was gonna be murdered if he came back. So they just don't address that. They don't address the like, why aren't people questioning Bran at all? They just like all take him at face value. Like, yeah, he sees everything now, and he kind of just like pointed out the fact that, hey, Dany, I saw your dragon die. She's like, who the fuck are you? I don't know who you are, but people are like, he sees things. They're like, why does, like, everybody just kind of accepts it at this point. And then if people do accept it, why aren't characters questioning it and asking him for information?
That's a great point, which in my opinion, the thing I'm most excited about this season, besides finding out the ending, is new characters meeting each other, and like characters who have never met each other before in the entire history of the show.
Yeah.
And I remember from the earlier seasons, by far my favorite part of the show were the long dialogue scenes of two characters that completely disagreed with each other on such fundamental levels, and those conversations would bring out revelations and discoveries in the characters it would sometimes be like really profound. And then this episode, which I kind of liked, but like Daenerys meeting Sansa, all you get are kind of like a couple dirty looks, a comment about what dragons eat, and I was kind of expecting a longer scene with introductions and more introductions to be, I don't know, for there to be more conflict in them.
Yeah, they've kind of just given you like the face value of their emotions as characters and like just kind of what they're thinking on the basest level possible. Like you're saying, we can't expect them to go into depth or detail and like be speaking with ulterior motives and like, oh, I'm gonna kind of like when Sansa's talking to Tyrion and she's like, I always thought you were the smartest man ever, and he just kind of looks at his hands like, what's happened in my life? It's like Tyrion is a great example of what's happened to the writing of these characters, where he did used to be one of the smartest characters, but even this has kind of happened in the last book too. He's such a smart character that nobody knows what to do with him because nobody like can figure out what his motive should be. So now in the past couple seasons of the show, he's had no motives. He's had nothing to do. He just kind of is there at this point. And the only thing that would make sense right now to me of what his character is going to mean by the end of the show, because if he doesn't do anything with his sister or have anything to do with his sister, his characters become pointless. But the only thing I can think is like maybe he is either teaming up with Cersei because he doesn't want to see Jaime die, because he saw Jaime almost get killed by the dragon. So maybe he's actually sided with his sister and he is deciding to betray Daenerys, or he is just going to be like used as a way to take his sister down and maybe end up like maybe killing her or working alongside Jaime to kill her or something.
That's an interesting theory. I definitely think he's been shoved into a corner of the type of character, the same type that Varys or any of the other like advisor characters been into. But one thing that separated Tyrion from that is like in the second season or second book, he basically is the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. He's like not by title, but he's the actual leader.
Yeah.
And I always kind of thought like after the war is done and over, Tyrion should be the one who whether it's by title or what, should be the one who rules the Seven Kingdoms. But at this point, when all of like the chosen ones are chosen, Jon and Daenerys, he's been sidelined so bad that I can't possibly imagine why he's important at all anymore. Like
he hasn't done anything. Well, Jake, were you gonna say something?
I don't think they have many thoughts or ideas on what to do with this character. Even the scene where, what was it? It was early on when they had like in Winterfell, they all met and they were discussing what they were going to do in the future, and they were all looking to Jon as their leader. And for whatever reason, Tyrion gets up and tries to convince everyone that, hey, we're going to have the Lannister army here to defend us, and he practically gets booed.
Yeah.
I just don't think they really have much to do left for his character arc. I feel like the advisors, like you said, I think they're just going to get pushed to the background because you have 5 more episodes to work with. I just can't see them focusing on anything that Varys has to do, or Tyrion, or even Davos. They're going to be pushed way behind. They don't have much to do.
I feel
They're
like
characters that kind of rely on there being a civilization to function. And same with Littlefinger. Once that civilization gets to bare bones, there's not much left for them to be able to do power-wise.
But there's got to be something more intended, and this isn't even necessarily on the show anymore. I'm more speaking about the books. Like, there needs to be more intended for Tyrion, because he has been one of the main central characters to the storyline in general.
You could argue he is the central character. He's
well, I would argue that it's Daenerys, Jon, and Tyrion initially, or at least according to the books, because Cersei is a bad person and whatnot, but she's a side character. Jaime's a side character. Bran could arguably be a main character, because it depends on what you define as the main story. In the main story,
Bran's very important important, but he doesn't get enough chapters to call him like a central character. I might argue Arya might even be a central character because of how much book space she takes up.
I would still kind of consider her a side character if, depending on what is the central story, which should be the White Walkers. The whole main story is it's
Song
not
of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, it's not who ends up on the Iron Throne. It's a Game of Thrones because it's all political and whatnot, but the story or the general story of the show in books are there's a bunch of evil zombies and people got to fight them. And that means Jon and Daenerys are the main characters to that story because without either one of them, you wouldn't have a Song of Ice or Fire. Necessarily. I mean, I could also be wrong.
Which also brings me to an interesting point that I think is it okay if I share my prediction for the ending of the show?
Yeah, that's fine.
Alright. Well, I think that Jon is the Song of Ice and Fire, and the couple of Jon and Daenerys, that's not the Song of Ice and Fire. Because I think in Jon's situation, also with his parents, obviously, but in his situation, you have the White Walkers to the north, and then the Daenerys and her dragon is coming from a foreign land. I think Jon he's in love with Daenerys, obviously, but I think there's a destructive nature to Daenerys that is putting the world in whatever the opposite of balance is. And that I think the solution to beating the White Walkers isn't going to be some Lord of the Rings heroic martial arts or anything. I think he's going to have to somehow sacrifice Daenerys to get the White Walkers to leave. And some of this first episode, I think I'm seeing that it's supporting that prediction because of how absolutist Daenerys is and how her dragons, I don't know, they're seen like not liking the North. They, burping after eating fucking goats alive. I don't know. I see something bad happening.
When you also, I mean, another thing we can touch on is the whole scene with Sam, where Sam finds out how Daenerys burned his dad and his brother to death, which that was probably the one scene that I got kind of teary-eyed because I really like Sam's character, and I feel like that actor put on a really great performance in that scene. But right after that happened, Sam has to go deliver that big revelation to Jon, and when Jon's given all this information, he does kind of give that look like, oh, maybe Daenerys isn't as black and white as he thought. Like she has some gray areas to her in her past that he hasn't really considered as she's kind of gained her power and rapport and name and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that Sam questions Jon, would you have done the same thing? And he doesn't really give a straight answer, but second after he asks that question, you kind of know the answer is no, I wouldn't have done the same thing.
He kind of has, though, in the past, though, with like Janos Slynt when he decapitated him. I mean, he had to put Ollie to death. As much as we hated Ollie, he was still a little kid. Like, Jon's had to do some pretty bad things as well.
That's a good point, but I think what separates that is that Daenerys has always been a conqueror, and Jon has always been somebody who brings people together in the cold, hellish world of the far north. And so he has certainly had different obstacles where putting those characters to death was kind of what needed to be done to bring
like peace,
order back to the settlement.
Well, yeah.
I wanted to add to that and say, well, first off, that scene where Daenerys tells Sam about his family, father and brother being burned, right into Sam telling Jon that he's Aegon, and then Bran seeing Jaime are probably the best scenes of this episode, hands down. I think what they're establishing between John and Daenerys is going to probably be the best plot line. I think that was predictable going into the season. But what I began to realize was it would be very poetic if John, knowing the truth that he's Aegon Targaryen, but he only knows this because of Sam and because of Bran, which we should clarify that Bran in this episode considers himself dead, and he is officially the three-eyed Raven. Like, there is nothing tied to his character Bran anymore other than name. But I think having that piece of information that John is the true heir to the throne, and it's only backed by his brother and best friend, although it's the truth, we know from season 1 that the truth isn't always accepted like you think it should be. And having Ned have his head cut off for trying to tell the truth about Joffrey being a bastard incest child is going to happen again to John if he tells Daenerys that he is supposed to have the throne and not her. And I could see a plot, or I'm almost predicting that John's going to die because he told the truth, similar to how Ned died for telling the truth.
Which would actually be thematically poetic as well, as you're kind of saying, because this episode was extremely reminiscent of the first episode when you have Cersei and King Robert coming and like arriving at the gates and whatnot, and their whole entourage is behind them and whatnot. And then you have Dany and John showing up, and they're showing up with the armies and everything back behind them, and it's got the same music, it's got the same everything tied to it. And then we all remember what happened to King Robert. King Robert ended up getting killed
by a boar.
Yeah, so maybe John will get killed by a boar. But I would say I agree with that, where one of them is probably going to end up dying. And like I don't know if the showrunners are that intelligent and poetic to make it kind of similar to how Ned Stark got killed because he was such an honorable character and he spoke up on things like that. I don't know if it'll be that way because that seems like a very good theory. So it probably won't happen.
I always hoped, though, I get that Ned Stark was very honorable and a good man, but especially in the books, I always kind of hoped that John, because of the bitter, cold world that he became a man in, wouldn't be that dumb. And this has not been supported by the show at all, especially in the Battle of the Bastards, where John just charges into the whatever stupid thing he did. But in the show, he shows a lot more smarts about what it takes to be a ruler, more than just always doing the right thing no matter what, without thinking about anything at all. Where John, at least, I hope on some level, has a little bit more brains, kind of similar to Tyrion. And so I don't know if he's headed for that path, even on the show. Mm-hmm. But it is a good theory.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because it depends on what they really want to delve into, too. Because we have to expect that a lot of these 80-minute episodes are going to be battle sequences. Because one of the episodes coming up, and it may actually be episode 3, is just going to be one long battle sequence against the living and the dead. And it's supposed to be like the longest one put on in film history and whatnot. Which means there's an entire episode where there's probably going to be no or minimal plot development, and it's just going to be like a exhibition of special effects, basically, which I'm fine with. I think it'll be cool, but we have to expect that there's not going to be a lot of time put in for figuring out details of what's going on, especially if they're, like Jake mentioned earlier, they've already kind of wasted an episode with really nothing happening.
And can I also add another difference between the books is I feel like, and this hasn't been written yet in the books, or maybe it's been written, it hasn't been released yet, Jaime is in a situation where he's going to have to come face to face with his past and his regrets and like every part about him that isn't his cocky, confident personality. And in the show, I think they're trying to set that up too, but the only thing is, the one thing in Jaime's past that he doesn't feel any guilt about, that he was actually justified in, is killing the king, killing the Mad King. And I think the show is putting him in a place where he's going to have to apologize for that, where I think that's completely the wrong thing to have his character have to come to terms with. He shouldn't, like, he's going to be brought up to Daenerys, and Daenerys is going to be like, all right, well, I hate you. And then he's going to be like, what? I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. That's not genuine. And what point after that, where is his character going to go? Is he going to be sent on a mission to kill Cersei, or is Daenerys going to be like, all right, well, you said you're sorry. I'm going to trust you now to be a commander of an army.
I feel like Bran's character is going to step in and at that point, because Bran already had visions of the Mad King, which means he's probably already visited that. We just, as viewers, haven't seen it happen. So
that's actually a good point.
Because Daenerys is probably going to confront Jaime and be like, oh, yeah, you killed the Mad King, and how do we know you're not going to do the same thing to me? And that's what you're sent here to do, blah, blah, blah. And Bran's just going to show up and be like, yeah,
He's going to be like,
I had this vision,
me,
you know.
I'm objective. I got thrown out of a window by him.
Yeah. And he's like, man, if I can forgive him, you can forgive him. Like, he's justified.
I'm still surprised that everyone must trust what Bran says. I know he's proved that he's been right, but it is just a little odd to me that everyone is accepting what he says.
Yeah, even Daenerys, who just met him, is like, oh, you saw my dragon get killed, but you weren't there, and I've never seen you before. It seems legit.
I think what these later seasons, for me personally, have been missing is that the show drew me in because a lot of the time spent on the show was showing that titles don't matter, where you're from doesn't matter. When you're by yourself in a bad situation, it's really up to who's ever in control. Like, for instance, when Jaime got his hand cut off, even though he was the greatest swordsman, his titles, his name, it didn't matter, because in that moment, he wasn't the one in power, and I kind of miss that about the show. And I think this season, it's gonna be, it feels like it's going to be predictable, because it's missed kind of that hard
I agree.
element.
I remember, because I'm a nerd, I watched an interview, or I either watched an interview or read something where a critic called George R. R. Martin's series nihilistic, and then he responded to that saying, like, he receives different kinds of criticisms, and that's fine, but to call it nihilistic is just moronic, because every scene that he crafts is very existentialist. It's very meaningful on a very, like, personal level, where your titles don't matter, this doesn't matter, bad things happen, and sometimes you can't control it, but at the end of the day, like, you're by yourself, and I think that's really, I don't know, that's kind of missing from, now it feels like the whole series is guided by a storyteller instead of guided by a bunch of individual characters with their own motivations.
Yeah, I always felt like it was like Game of Thrones. Life isn't fair. Like, that is the tagline, and there's just some fantasy. It's hard reality, just with a little bit of fantasy elements, and how do these characters deal with that? And I think the writing has gotten to the point where you can visibly notice plot armor, and you can tell that in this season specifically, because they collapsed so many of the sets, and they had to get all the characters to converge into single settings, I feel like it's forced. I enjoy seeing characters come together who've never seen each other and talk, but I'm just worried that the conversations are going to be nowhere near as meaningful or as in depth as they were in previous seasons.
They're gonna end up just being dick and fart jokes.
And this is also a lot of the issues stem from the budget and time constraints, because you can no longer have like these long, interesting, deep conversations that foreshadow and predict what's going to happen in the future. You now just have to get, even like supporting characters who run into each other have to just talk about main plot points and main plot characters.
It's almost because the budget's too high and the time constraints are too intense. Like, they think that it's important, since they only have 7 episodes left, that nobody wants to hear anybody talk about anything. They want to see the big fireworks at the end.
Yeah, they assume everybody wants to see John riding the dragon, and everybody wants to see Sandor Clegane fight Gregor Clegane, and everybody wants to see a big shootout between Cersei, Bronn, Jaime, and all that, and everybody wants to see the big battle sequences, and I feel like they're putting their eggs in the wrong basket of what made the show great, because in the early seasons, I didn't even care about the fighting and the battle sequences and whatnot. Kind of like what Jake was going off of. What made that first couple seasons, and what makes the first season my favorite, is that, like, when you watch the episodes, especially when you rewatch them after seeing later seasons, you realize things that these characters are saying and doing that you didn't realize the first couple times you watched it. And you keep picking up on little details about these characters' motives and who they really are as people, and who they pretend to be to one character and who they really are in front of another character. And, like, they completely change. They feel very dynamic and like fleshed out, and they feel like they aren't just as black and white as they kind of appear now in these later seasons, where it's like, well, I'm a good guy and Daenerys is Jesus and she's invincible and she always comes in to save the day. It's like, they used to be I don't know, they used to feel like actual people going through real situations, but they don't anymore.
Like, I remember people saying, oh, I like when Jaime turned into a good guy. Like, I like when Jaime found redemption, but
he used to be
really
the most hated character on the show.
It's not really Jaime. I mean, Jaime changes a little bit, but it's really the viewer who changed after realizing more to the story of these characters. Where if you go back and watch the first episodes, Jaime doesn't do anything out of character that he wouldn't do later on. I mean, maybe a few things, but he's still the same person, and that's what's kind of missing now, is that the characters have been squished down to fit into the, like Jake said, the plot armor.
And it's almost like there's no more consequences on the show either, because, like, characters can make horrible decisions and then they get a pass because they're a show favorite and they have to be in the final season. Because, like, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I really feel like Jaime should have died in that episode when he decided to charge a fucking dragon while he's riding a horse with just a lance. It's like, you shouldn't live from that. But Bronn just jumps in and saves the day. It's like, that just felt so lazy to me for what was a great scene. Because I didn't really see that scene coming. All of a sudden, there's a huge battle and, like, important characters are on either side of the battle and they could hurt each other. Bronn literally almost killed Daenerys in that episode, and like things could have went really wrong, and then everybody comes out unscathed. And then you have
zero consequences.
Yeah, and then you have episode 6 of last season when they decide to go kidnap a zombie, a walker or whatever, and bring it back to Cersei for whatever fucking reason they thought that was a good use of time. And they all go over there. There's like a group of apparently 100 of them, and 99 of them were miscellaneous characters who get eaten throughout that scene. But, like, they go out there with all these characters and nobody gets punished for, like, they get themselves into a horrible situation. And then Daenerys just comes in and saves the day and nobody's punished. I mean, you have a dragon get killed and Thoros of Myr gets killed, but, like, Thoros of Myr wasn't even an important character at that point. Like, his character could have died 10 seasons ago and nobody would have known the difference in that scene. Like, it doesn't feel like there's any danger for any of these characters anymore when they get themselves into stupid situations or charge dragons with a lance.
It's interesting that you bring up that scene because that's probably the last scene or the most recent scene that I really held on to and I absolutely adored.
Which one?
Where Jaime charges at.
Oh yeah, no, that was an amazing scene.
And to me, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I really wanted if Jaime killed Daenerys, that would have been the biggest shocker I think of all time. For me personally, that's what I wanted to happen because Jaime, Jon Snow, and Samwell Tarly are probably my favorite characters. And
good pick.
I feel as though Jaime, they're going to squander his character arc in this season. I don't know what they're going to do. Whereas they had a moment that was so perfect and out of the blue and in his character where season 1, you hate this guy, and he's at a moment where you have to pick. Do you like Daenerys or do you like Jaime?
Yep.
I found myself, I was like, Jaime, fucking kill her. Do it. Do it. I wanted him to go and sacrifice himself to get Daenerys and then get killed by a dragon. I feel like that would have been an amazing story arc.
And you know that would have been too. And that would have been, I mean, if either one of those scenarios played out where he gets burned to death or he does Lancer and he gets away with it, both of those would just throw a huge egg right in the middle of the pond. Because, like, either way, you either have Daenerys dying or you have Tyrion watch the only person from his family that he cares about and cares about him, burning to death. Which just throws a huge thing in the middle of there, but they didn't go either way.
Right, and I'm worried in this season that Jaime won't have much to do. We'll find out next episode, so I'll hold my tongue.
Well,
I just don't think the writing has been as sharp, and I don't believe that they have another twist for Jaime that's going to be like a wow factor. I'm worried his story's going to kind of end with a little bit of a whimper.
And that's the problem with having so many miscellaneous characters. Because Jaime's a miscellaneous character, the Hound's a miscellaneous character, Brienne's a miscellaneous character. And then all the guys at the wall right now, Beric Dondarrion and Dolorous Edd and all them, they're all miscellaneous characters. But they're giving them like stuff to do, but it's like, how important is it really that these are the characters that need to be doing it, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think the only thing they can really do for Jaime that I'm going to predict is they're going to find a way. I'm almost worried that they're going to shorten the White Walker part of it. Or maybe it's this. Maybe Winterfell falls and they all have to retreat to King's Landing, where Euron is going to... I don't know how they're going to have it, but I feel like Jaime's going to run into Euron, and then he's going to have to fight Euron because he fucked Cersei. Like,
oh, that'd be dumb.
I feel like that's where they're going. That's my prediction for. I'm going to predict for episode 4 that that's what happens. I think Jaime's going to somehow be written back for whatever reason. He has to go back to King's Landing, and this is assuming that Bronn doesn't kill him, which is that was a somewhat interesting story or plot that they introduced Cersei paying Bronn to kill both Tyrion and Jaime.
That was actually probably the funniest part of the episode too, when Bronn's about to get himself in a 4-way, and then Master Qyburn comes in, or Maester Qyburn, and he's like, oh, that girl's going to be dead from the pox within a year, and he's like, which girl?
Four-way stop.
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe for a second that Bronn is going to try to kill either Tyrion or Jaime. Because the other thing is, he already has the gold, so why does he have to go through with killing either one of them?
Right, and
he's a fan favorite. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Like, they've already introduced so many times, they're like, hey Bronn, here's gold. Hey Bronn, you want more gold? How about a castle and a way? What if we just give you just more gold? It's like, how many times can you use that plot device?
Yeah, how much gold does one guy need?
And not only that, they've established him as a much more in-depth character than in the books. So they kind of have him in the show, actually, he's a pretty well-written character, and at this point, it's hard to believe that he would kill Tyrion and Jaime. He's way closer to them than he is to Cersei. It's
Yeah,
hard to believe that.
he's only with Cersei right now just by happenstance, like on accident, because he was in Jaime's army, helping Jaime train, and then it just so happens he got himself in the middle of a battle and he had to choose a side for this upcoming war. But yeah, I don't think he gives a shit about Cersei whatsoever. That's why I don't believe for a second that he would actually go through with killing either one of them. What I think the one thing we've overlooked in this episode, and probably my favorite part of the episode, is actually that new opener that they've done. What'd you guys think about that when they're going through like the wall that's already been collapsed and they show the turning tiles, like the dead approaching?
I thought that was cool.
I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I even wrote down just to make sure, but all you have left that they showed is Last Hearth, Winterfell, and King's Landing. So
Yeah.
I'm a little sad that we barely went to any locations. It was cool to see them in detail, but seeing how far or how much they've collapsed in terms of set pieces was a little sad.
Well, if you think about it though, a lot of like the characters from the other locations and whatnot are so not necessary or dead, because like
Right. I
all
totally
the
understand that.
like all the Boltons are gone. You have little, what is it, little Robert Aaron, the little sickly kid. I don't really care what he's been up to. I can live without him popping up this season. You have like all the story with the sand snakes and whatnot, but they already all died and everybody over there is dead. Daenerys is in the north now, so we don't need anything in like Essos and all that. Arya traveled back. So it's like at this point, I get why they're doing it. You really only need those two places because you're going to have the White Walkers fighting the Winterfell, and then Winterfell is going to be fighting King's Landing afterwards.
Or do you think King's Landing and Winterfell will fight first, and then the White Walkers last?
I would say that the White Walkers are probably going to arrive at the gates at the end of the next episode, and then they're going to have to fight them, and the White Walkers are going to beat them in episode 3, and then it's going to ruin their plans, and they might have to retreat to King's Landing, which is where Cersei's going to have her plan ready, and she's going to try to turn it into like the next Red Wedding where she murders everybody, and then it just makes everything go awry. That's what I think's going to happen.
What about Euron? We touched a bit how we think he's going to end up fighting Jaime.
Ooh, I was going to bring this up too. Keep going, sorry.
Oh no, you can take over.
I think the Greyjoy plot points have been pretty weak. I
Agreed.
find myself caring for Yara, or my boy Reek. I still like to call him Reek.
It rhymes with weak.
The best thing they did this episode was kill Rob McKinley. That was probably the best part.
Yeah, him and Martin Starr.
Yeah. Killing Mac from It's Always Sunny was the best part of the Greyjoy plot this episode. Euron, I kind of like him, kind of don't. Out of what they've done with Theon and Yara, I think Euron's a bit more interesting. I just think he's only there to have an army to fight in a future episode, to fight for Cersei, because they were getting a little stretched thin for Lannisters. It was like the army that would never die, like they got absolutely obliterated by Dothraki and dragons, yet they still somehow have the greatest army. It's a little confusing logistically, and they talked about it early on in the Winterfell meeting. I'm still so confused where they get all these Lannisters from.
Yeah, I'm not sure, unless they're just like picking off people from the street and training them, but they don't have time to do that. And with the whole Euron storyline, I really feel like they just needed a new bad guy for everybody to hate, because you have Joffrey. And then you have Ramsay Bolton, and then Ramsay Bolton's gone, so then they're like, let's introduce another bad guy. And he
doesn't compare at all to either Ramsay or Joffrey.
Because he's so one-dimensional. Like, all he does... I mean, he's like pure id, basically. He just follows his... or is it the id that, like, is just base instinct, and it just does... Yeah, he's just pure id. He's like, oh, I want sex now. I'm going to go have sex. I want fighting now. I'm going to go fight. I want to drink beer. I'm going to go drink beer. Like, that's all his character really does. That's basically all he's really good for, is just being there and...
And it's kind of irritating that it feels like the writers take him so seriously, too, is that I think he'll have some great conflict with one of the main characters, and it's like... we haven't really known him that much up to this point that it could really justify him having any really important role.
Yeah, he wasn't like the Euron in the book where he shows up and he burns his own hand to try to save his ship, and when that doesn't work, he just starts throwing people overboard and sacrificing them to the sea because he's just like just pure anarchist.
In the show, he has that horn, the dragon horn.
Yep.
That, which also I have a theory that they say the horn brings the wall down. I don't think the horn actually brings the wall down. I think the horn might take control or call a dragon, which a dragon could take the wall down. But it's a little off topic.
I feel for the show that Euron is just an extension of Cersei. I still think she's the main bad guy, quote unquote.
Well, yeah.
In King's Landing, and he really just, the way they've written him in the show, he just feels like a little bit of like the muscle extension of Cersei. Although, like, she has the mountain, he's mute, so he can't have any dialogue. But he feels like, Euron feels like he was written just to be the muscle and the army for Cersei, and just a further extension of her evil, and possibly a reason to fight Jaime.
I really hope they don't go that route, though, where... I know it's going to happen, though, where Euron has a one-on-one battle with somebody. It just... It feels so predictable and lazy.
They might, now that I think about it, they might do it to make Cersei have to choose. So she wants Euron to be this... Maybe she's planning on having Euron help her escape when the White Walkers come, but she might have to make a choice to stay with Jaime, who will redeem himself and want to fight for the living of some kind.
Or...
They might do something like that.
Or she tries to get them to answer for their crimes. Because I still think that the White Walkers are going to attack Winterfell episode 3. They're going to have to retreat. And they're going to be like, hey, Cersei, you said you would help us out. The dead are coming. And she might be like, well, before we do that, somebody has to answer for their crimes. And she's going to call for a trial by combat and whatnot. And I feel like something's going to happen where they're going to try to do another style of the Red Wedding. And it's going to involve Cersei somehow trying to betray everybody and basically ruining everything.
It would be cool if we actually saw... Here's a path for Euron. If Cersei betrays Euron by... because he's too chaotic and uncontrollable for her, if she had the Mountain kill him, because they always have, like, a stare down, and then that would make Cersei that much more kind of, hateable. I mean, when a character you don't like kills another character you don't like, that's just kind of what happens, and then that could also, foreshadow the fact that she's going to betray everybody else, too.
Well, by that logic, Bran's going to kill every single character in this show. Because that dude ends up everywhere.
God, yeah.
And he's just staring everybody down. Tyrion's talking to Sansa, and then Tyrion looks over and Bran's just like staring at him. And there is one theory that I saw online that I thought was hilarious if it's true. That whole like sensual look that the dragon gives Jon after he's making out with Daenerys.
Oh,
Somebody mentioned that may have been Bran warging into the dragon just watching.
It definitely was.
It definitely should be, because that would be hilarious. And
or everybody forgets that John's a warg too. Why did that just get thrown out?
well, he's a warg in the books, but I don't think he ever warged anything in the show.
He did. I think it was season 3 when he's scouting with Night's Watch, and there's a wildling warg who wargs into an eagle or something.
Yep.
And I think they used John to warg into the same eagle or something, or he wargs into Ghost. There's something, I don't even remember, but
I think I know what you're talking about. They don't ever, like, have him warging more so than, like, Ghost will just kind of, like, appear whenever he's in danger. Because there was the warg who, after he killed him, it was during the Red Wedding episode, he ends up, like, stabbing him in front of that castle place that Bran's hiding in. And then the dude wargs into his eagle again and then, like, comes down and tries to peck out his eyes. But there's never, like, a scene where John's eyes flip up and whatnot. But in the books, all the Starks are wargs. Like, Arya wargs into Nymeria all the time.
Even a cat.
Yeah. She does turn into the cat. But it never really did that much so on the show. Because I think they would just end up confusing people if they tried to do that too much. Like Rob warging into his wolf and whatnot. But Jake had a really good point in the beginning of this episode. And they did it for money reasons last season. But I don't know their reasoning for not bringing him back. Where the fuck is Ghost?
Right? Like, we haven't seen him interact with a dragon. He should be at Jon Snow's side at all times.
Would Jon Snow even want a dire wolf now that he can ride dragons, though? But
I would much rather see Ghost for, like, maybe 30 seconds than see a whole 5-minute long scene with dragons at this point. Like,
yeah, just something.
Where did he go?
He just kind of disappeared. It's like, all right, cool.
I don't know why they didn't do it when he was at, Dragonstone. I don't understand when he first saw the dragon why he didn't have Ghost there. That would have been such a better scene if Ghost was with him and wasn't backing down. Because I think they really emphasized Daenerys' connection with her dragons, and I felt like all the Starks had that same connection to their dire wolves, and they just never emphasized that.
Couldn't agree more.
Probably because of budgetary reasons, but if you're gonna spend 3 minutes riding dragons for a scene, like a 3-minute dragon riding scene, you could have had Ghost at the beginning of it. You could have threw a little money there and just been like, all right, Ghost, you can leave. I'm gonna ride this dragon for no reason. It's annoying that they don't have it. I feel like they're not gonna have Ghost until the 3rd episode.
They may also just forget that Ghost exists and never even bring it up.
They might just kill him at the beginning of the 3rd episode so they don't have to keep doing it for the rest.
I kind of hope not.
I think he's going to show up again, but if he's anything like the other dire wolves, he's just going to get a meaningless death in war.
Well, Nymeria's still out there, but she's probably never going to come back.
Yeah, I will predict that Nymeria is never going to come back, and I got a hunch that they're going to barely touch upon Bran and warging. I don't think warging is going to be a thing in this season. I don't think it's going to happen.
Unless Hodor comes back as a zombie and Bran has to warg into him again.
I'm all for that.
That would be...
And have him hold a door, like, again.
He has to hold something else.
Hold Winterfell's gate closed.
Yeah.
He's just holding it closed, like, fuck. Doesn't even say Hodor.
Night King is like, we can't do anything. It's Hodor. The single purpose in the show is to hold doors.
What if Hodor is the Night King?
I'm not even going to entertain that.
So, I'm going to have to start getting going soon, but one of the last things that I wanted to bring up, because I thought it was kind of interesting, but also kind of weird, was the reunion with Arya and the Hound, and how it's kind of like cold and like unwelcoming, and it's kind of like, oh, you're still alive because you're a cold bitch. But last season, the Hound was talking to Brienne, and he's like, yeah, oh, Arya's still alive? And he's kind of smirking and happy about it. But then he just, like, comes face to face with her, and he's like, fuck you. You left me to die. Just seemed kind of weird.
That did feel weird to me. I agree.
Like, I get that they're both cold characters, but why does he show all that emotion last season, and then he comes face to face with her, and he's back to his stoic self again? It was weird.
After all that, like, Arya is a very cold person, and I could see her reaction being cold, but his, he could have, like, at least done, like, a smirk or something.
Yeah,
would have continued from last season.
It seemed like he went back to his season 2 roots, where he was just a completely cold character who did nice things, but his character recently isn't as heartless. It's more, I don't know, like, based in survival or something, and he has a lot more emotion now than he did before, so I didn't understand why he went back to being completely emotionless. Like you said, Arya's reaction made sense. Like, it makes sense that she would, like, kind of look at him like, hey, you're still on my list. I still might end up killing you. But it didn't make sense that he would be like, ooh, Arya's still alive. I can't wait to see her. And then he's like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're a bitch. It's like what? It just didn't make sense. Because he obviously cares about her, and she has some sort of admiration to him, or at least looks up to him because of his ability to kill people. I don't know. What you were going to say?
Worried about Arya's character, because I think her character has just been so poorly written, poorly executed the past few seasons.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really struggling to find myself care for anything that she has to do. Her seeing Gendry was probably the best part of her character of anything in a while. But is anyone else worried that she's going to be the character? I'm making a prediction now that she's going to be the character that possibly kills the Night King, because when she hands Gendry that schematic, it's like a launchable dragon glass dagger thing.
I thought it looked like a projectile.
It clearly says, like, with an arrow, dragon glass, and it looks like a launchable thing.
That or the dragon, maybe.
I was thinking it didn't make much sense why it would say dragon glass on it, because that leads you to believe that she wouldn't kill a human character with this, even though her whole character was based on killing people for revenge, and specifically people. She had almost no ties to the Night King or to dragons. She was about her list and who she was going to kill on that list. Yet in that schematic, it clearly says in big old words, in almost a comedic way, dragon glass.
It's drawn out in crayon.
It is drawn in crayon. It makes you believe that she's going to kill, like, a White Walker, and that leads me to a question for you guys. Who's going to kill the Night King if he does get killed?
Well, it depends on what the Night King's motives really are, because if my theory's correct and Winterfell loses the first battle, we might learn more about the Night King afterwards, and there could be, like, sympathy behind it, like, oh, they were created by the children of the forest, and maybe they actually want to die, and that's their purpose for marching forward. I don't know. There could be something behind it where they're not just the embodiment of evil trying to destroy all life.
I agree. I think there was a pact that got broken, which summoned them back. I don't think the reason that they're there isn't initiated by something bad. I do think that the reason they're there is initiated by something bad the humans did.
Well,
and I don't think the Night King is necessarily going to die.
There was one theory, and it is, I can't remember who, it may have been Jake and I who talked about it, I can't remember. No, it was my brother brought it up. So, my brother was saying that there's a possibility that all the Night King really wants is Craster's son. And Gilly is actually the reason why all the Night King and the army is coming through, is because they want the child. I don't think it's true, but it's an interesting thought that Sam and Gilly are the whole reason this is happening.
When was the child taken? Season 3?
Uh,
I believe so.
something like that, because that's when they go to Craster's Keep and then they kind of like disappear and whatnot. The army does start marching at the end of season 2, though, so it wouldn't make too much sense, but it's an interesting thought.
Right, that's a pretty funny thought.
Yeah, like the Night King just like shows up and he's like, "I want my baby back, baby back, baby back."
Chilies.
Do we want to do closing thoughts on the episodes and then possible predictions for the next episode?
I think we've done a lot of predictions already, but yeah, I'm good with closing thoughts. Or you're talking about just for the next episode? Yeah.
How about we do closing thoughts on this episode, or you could just predict what you want to happen for the end of the show, possibly.
Yeah, let's do that. I'll just go first, like real quick. I thought the episode was fine. There's things that I liked about it. There's things I didn't like about it. My prediction for the next episode is hopefully we learn more about the Mad King storyline and that Bran may have accidentally caused the Mad King, because that's always been my theory. But that's what I'm hoping for.
I believe I'm in pretty much the same boat as you. I would like to see them dive more into the Mad King, and I think they're going to do that by having Jaime now as a captive. Daenerys is obviously going to have some questions for him, and I hope Bran steps in, and I hope what you say is true, and that we can believe Bran might be manipulating the Mad King, or he did manipulate the Mad King way back when.
I 100% believe that, because especially in the books, they always mention that the Mad King started hearing voices in his head, and we've already seen that Bran can manipulate that. And I just want to point out that you said, "I hope Bran steps in." That was very clever.
Oh, right. My bad. He just kind of appears now. Someone's been wheeling him around, and he just,
Yeah,
I did.
somebody's been pushing him around and leaving him outside the entire night. They're like, "Oh, he's a northerner. He can sit outside in the goddamn cold all night. Bring that cripple in. What the hell are you doing?"
Winterfell is like so ahead of its time with its wheelchair accessibility. It's mind blowing. For me, the episode was as okay as you can make an episode. The strong points again were just Sam, John, and finding out that John realizing he's Aegon, but the episode was just brought down by the dragon riding scene for me, and so much reviewing of what we already know just kept the episode just a baseline okay episode.
Fair enough.
I agree. I thought the episode, I really didn't want to be like hugely disappointed, and I wasn't. Just one more last thought is that Sansa was very naive. We didn't talk much about her character. She was very dumb in the beginning because she was a kid. And in the show, she uses all of her experiences getting manipulated by people to become very smart and, like, awesome. But unfortunately, the world of the show right now isn't a smart and awesome and cleverly written world. So I am not seeing at all any reason to believe that Sansa is smart. Like, in Season 2, Tyrion makes all these decisions, and you see, like, oh, wow, he really knows what he's doing. Like, he takes all this chaos, and he's a really clever mind. I'm not seeing that from Sansa right now, because nothing really... What does she order food for people and make sure everybody's fed? Like, that's just something I kind of expect a leader to do. So, like in the scene where Arya's like, my sister's the smartest person I've ever met, that in itself would also seemed out of character for Arya.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that was too out of character for Arya just because they've been separated so long. But I get what you're saying, because if you look at it, she's really only done two things, and that's saved Jon at the Battle of the Bastards by getting Littlefinger to ride in with the Lords of the Vale or whatever, or the Knights of the Vale. And then the other thing that she did was just outsmart Littlefinger. But in Littlefinger's horrible attempt at trying to pit the Starks against each other. And that's really all Sansa's done at this point. Other than that, she has been a survivor, and she's been, unfortunately, put in countless horrible situations. And it makes sense that she has grown and become a very strong and smart individual because of it. But she hasn't really done anything to really show that, other than those two things.
Exactly. Like, after her being through all of those things, I really wish the writers would have done a better job at showing examples of how she's grown.
Yeah, give her something more to do.
We have to trust their word, like, oh, okay, she's smart now.
Yeah, and it's like, she's smarter than Tyrion because she thought of the fact that maybe Cersei isn't pregnant and is just using him. And that's why I kind of think, too, that Tyrion could be setting up a double cross. Because it's like, Tyrion's character should be smart enough to know that. And they talked more than just 30 seconds when they met up with each other. And then, like, after that whole scene, like, Tyrion's kind of kept his head down and doesn't want to talk to people as much, it seems. So I feel like there could be something going on there, but we shall see.
So if there's anything we learned, all political characters and drama-based characters are taking a back seat, and let's just watch big battles.
Yeah, and we'll find out that the whole show takes place in the eye of a giant named Macumba.
Absolutely.
Well, that was our analysis of the first episode of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. I think it's entitled Winterfell. Just to let everybody know, there's spoilers. So if you're listening to this and you haven't watched the episode, just know that we do spoil things. Thanks for tuning. Yes, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in. All right, have a good one. Peace.